Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a really fascinating journey into the architecture of mythology. We're going to be looking at the sword. But, not just as a piece of sharpened metal used for hacking and slashing, we're actually looking at the sword as a profound metaphysical tool used across diverse cultures to literally hack the code of reality itself.
So let's dive right into this. Have you ever noticed this incredibly persistent pop culture trope? I mean, think about it. When the muscle-bound hero finally climbs the highest mountain in search of the ultimate warrior, they almost never find a gigantic hulking brawler, right? Instead, they find a frail, elderly hermit making a cup of tea. We see this everywhere. But why? What's the actual structural logic behind this creative choice?
To understand this, we're going to trace this journey through a few key concepts. We'll break down the anatomy of the sword saint, compare the Japanese Kensei and Chinese Jian Shen, explore the ultimate reality distortion, shift gears to Western myths as a kind of root exploit, and finally, synthesize it all with internal versus external truth.
Starting right off with our first section, the anatomy of the sword saint and defining the ultimate master.
See, the true master perfectly subverts our expectations. The whole aesthetics of aging thing, it emphasizes that true power actually relies on internal energy, or qi, rather than raw physical muscle. The master completely transcends the weapon, achieving the state of man and sword as one. And at this absolute peak, they develop what's known as the mind blade. They literally don't even need forged steel anymore. We're talking turning grass, twigs, or even raindrops into lethal blades, or projecting pure energy straight from their fingers. But to reach this, they have to embrace absolute solitude, abandoning basically all worldly ties so they can warp reality itself.
And this brilliantly illustrates how the archetype crosses media boundaries. In Chinese wuxia fiction, you have Dugu Chubai, who reached a level where nature itself became his blade. In Japanese history, Miyamoto Musashi famously defeated his greatest rival with a carved wooden oar. In modern gaming, Ishin from Sekiro is the very representation of combat perfection. And what about Western fantasy? Well, think about Yoda. He's a frail, old hermit, completely detached from politics, attuned to a metaphysical force through a glowing sword. It all points to the same idea. Ultimate perfection requires abandoning the physical world.
Moving on to Section 2, let's look at the divergence between the Kensei and the Jian Shen.
Now, this divergence is absolutely vital. The Japanese Kensei treats the sword as a method. Rooted in intense periods of warfare, this is all about the mastery of strategy, efficiency, and the psychological void. Basically, it's a state where action just occurs naturally, without conscious thought, mastering the literal space between opponents. Conversely, the Chinese Jian Shen treats the sword as a manifestation. Deeply tied to Taoist alchemy, the Jian Shen masters the flow of internal energetic frequencies, that qi we mentioned earlier, to directly alter the physical environment. So one masters the void, while the other masters energy.
Which brings us to Section 3, the ultimate reality distortion, or how these masters literally break the laws of physics.
To really grasp this extreme end of the spectrum, we need to define something called sword intent, or Zhenyi. This is the exact threshold where martial arts stops being about physical, mechanical movement and fully transitions into pure, reality-altering will. The master's willpower just becomes so incredibly dense, so tangible, that holding a physical piece of metal is utterly obsolete.
If you want to see this in action, just look at the incredible lore of the Storm Riders comic series. There's this ultimate technique called Sword 23. But get this, it's not actually a physical strike. It is a localized suspension of temporal and spatial laws. The master's intent literally freezes time, creating this crazy pocket dimension of pure, immutable willpower.
Now, what's really fascinating about this is how we can map this ancient martial arts logic directly onto modern computing concepts. Think of the human body as a slow, physical solver. It's basically like outdated hardware. It simply calculates reality way too slowly to execute a move that freezes time. The master's spirit, however, that's the high-speed software.
Which naturally leads us to the ultimate tragic irony of Eastern mastery. Because in order to run that high-speed spiritual software at reality-freezing speeds, the heavy, slow hardware has to be discarded. To unleash the ultimate technique, the physical body literally must die. True mastery of the sword is inextricably tied to the complete, absolute acceptance of one's own physical death.
Let's move to Section 4 and see how this builds, shifting our paradigm to Western myths and the concept of the root exploit.
Right here, the paradigm just completely shifts. In the West, the sword basically stops being a vehicle for internal chi. Instead, it becomes an ontological exploit. It acts as a decryption key, almost. The Western mythological sword is this external tool specifically designed to cut through the veil of physical or social reality. It's an implement that violently forces the world to stop lying. As you'll see, we can spot this pattern really clearly by looking at 3 distinct examples of this systemic decryption. We've got Excalibur as the structural key, Fragarach as the truth protocol, and Conan's Atlantean sword as the root exploit. First up, we have Excalibur. We so often think of the sword in the stone as just mere magic, right? But systematically, it's a literal hardware lock. Think about it. The realm is in total chaos because the hierarchy lacks a verified administrator. Drawing Excalibur isn't about physical strength at all. It's basically a biometric decryption of lineage. It instantly bypasses all the human political squabbling to verify the true divine ruler. Next is Fragarach, which is also known as the Answerer from Irish mythology. This sword was essentially a specialized truth protocol. Its specific systemic exploit was that anyone held at its point physically could not move, and more importantly, they could not tell a lie. It violently bypassed the social veil of human deception, physically forcing the target's hidden internal truth right out into the open world. No way around it. Then let's look at Hollywood pulp with the 1982 film Conan the Barbarian. Conan is trapped in this totally meaningless, closed-loop physical system known as the Wheel of Pain. But when he's chased into a dark tomb and discovers the ancient Atlantean sword, he finds the riddle of steel. The sword represents hidden knowledge. It actually allows Conan to leverage his will to hack his way out of his role as a slave, completely breaking out of that closed-loop system.
So the crucial point here is perfectly captured in this biblical quote from Matthew 10:34. The sword here is obviously not a physical weapon for combat, right? It's a purely conceptual schism. It's a programmatic tool designed to sever obsolete network ties. It's cutting away ancient traditions and the old world order to forcibly establish a radically new paradigm.
And that brings us to Section 5, where we synthesize all of this with internal versus external truth. It's amazing how these two contrasting architectures actually align so beautifully. In the Eastern tradition, the sword is an internal truth. The hero projects his truth outward, from within their own soul, to warp and alter physical reality itself. But in the Western tradition, the sword is an external artifact. The hero has to align themselves with this artifact to cut through deception and alter social or political reality. So one changes physics from the inside, while the other changes society from the outside. Which leaves us with this final provocative thought. If we take a step back and realize that across all these myths, the ultimate sword is essentially just a decryption key for reality, well, which system's veil are you currently trying to cut through? Are you trying to project your internal will to change your physical environment? Or are you seeking the external knowledge to break free from the system you're trapped in? Thank you so much for exploring this incredibly fascinating framework with me. Keep hacking your reality.